So I know a lot of you are probably wondering, how do I transition from my job to real estate full time? Well, my guest today, Matt Picheny, has done just this. He basically has gone from being an actor and having a career and doing different types of things in the corporate world and advertising to now he has over 8,000 doors, both passively and actively. And he actually has written this book called The Backstage Guide to Real Estate. And it's a great book, gives a lot of great examples on how to become more active in your passive investing, and even if you want to be more active as a general partner. So Matt, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Bronson. How are you?
I'm well, man. It's really good to have you. I've been really looking forward to this interview. Your book is awesome. We run a lot of the same
Awesome.
circles, so it's great to get connected. But why don't you just take us through the story of, the backstage guide to your life in this book and kind of how you got here? Like, just kind of give us the Cliff Note version of kind of how you got to 8,000 doors. That's really impressive.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Orlando, Florida, moved to New York City to pursue a career in theater. Not a lot of real estate people have that background, but I was a professional performer for 5 years. I was in 15 different productions throughout the US. And then I started tinkering around with computers on the side as a hobby, and that ended up becoming a job for me. This was in the mid 90s. And I was able to create my own company doing website development. So I had a little boutique agency in New York doing website development, digital marketing type of efforts. And 2001 comes along and the dot-com bubble bursts and my business is just imploding, because nobody's spending any money on any digital marketing projects at this point in time. So my clients were either going out of business or just their budgets are cut. And it just so happened I go home one day and I get a phone call and it's my landlord and he tells me I have 90 days to get out of the apartment that I'm living in.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So at this point, I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? I wanted to stay in New York City, but to get another apartment to rent in New York without a real job and without a business that had good financials, it was going to be impossible. Luckily, Showtime, which is the cable television channel, they were a client of mine and they offered me a position to come in-house there. And I was looking for a place to rent, but I ended up buying an apartment. I bought an apartment much further north than I had wanted necessarily to live. I wanted to live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, but my sister at the time was living in Washington Heights, and she saw a note on a bulletin board for an apartment for sale. I ended up buying that apartment, and a little over 2 years later, I sold it, and I saw my initial investment, my initial down payment in the property more than quadruple in value.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It was this big light bulb moment for me. I mean, I was making a good salary at this time, but I made more in that real estate transaction than a full year's worth of salary, right? So
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, how do I do this real estate thing again? Because this is really powerful. And that's what set me on the path to where I am now for I used that money and I bought a place on the Upper West Side, which is where I had always wanted to live. This time I owned instead of renting. So it was definitely a little bit of a step up. And then about a year after that, I bought my first investment property, which I talk about in the book. It was actually a piece of land. And then I decided a couple of years later to build a house on that property, and it was a rental house. And this kind of went on for about 10 years, part-time. Real estate investing, it was something that I liked doing. It was a thing I did on the side. Sold the place on the Upper West Side and did what is called a house hack nowadays, but I didn't even know there was a term for it back then. But bought a 2-unit in Brooklyn. My wife and I moved there. And a little over a year after that, she got approached with a really, really tremendous job opportunity for her in Miami, Florida. And when we made the move to Miami, that's when I transitioned from doing the real estate as a hobby on the side to it becoming my full-time job. That's when I found out about multifamily real estate syndications, started investing both passively and actively at that time. And that was about 6.5 years ago now.
Right. Well, let's take a pause there for a second. That's a lot that happened there. So let's go back to you. So yeah, I mean, basically your story, you're saying, there's this billboard with an apartment for sale on it or something, and your sister sent it to you. Like, how did you go from because we see advertisements all the time, or we see information all the time. but how did you know that that was for you, and how did you pull that off? Because obviously you're working a job. Was that a stretch financially? Like how did you, like, had you been going to meetups or talking to people that had done this, or how did you get from like 0 to 1?
None of that. I'm kind of just a crazy guy.
Try anything once, right?
You mentioned the book, right? And so it's a chapter in the book, and the chapter says, I think it starts off with something along the lines of, one day with no knowledge or no experience, I decided to just up and build a house in the middle of Northwest Connecticut. I mean, that's really what happened. Oh, sorry. We're talking about the first one. Sorry, my bad. We're talking about when I
want to hear that story though too. That sounds like an interesting story.
Sorry. When I bought the first place. So I had thought through this a little bit. And I did mention this in the book. That's where the lines got crossed. Sorry. My sister had she had a doctor, that she went to, her physician, and she became friendly with the family because they needed a babysitter, and she had like babysat for them or whatever. And they were selling their place on the Upper West Side. This is a few years before this, before I needed to move. And it was intriguing to me of like, oh, what would that be like to buy a place? So I had already gone through, at a very, very basic level, the thought of like, what would it be like to buy an apartment? And what might that look like? And what might the mortgage payments be, and all of that stuff? Now, my father used to be a residential real estate broker in Florida. He did that for a number of years, and then he went into the food service industry. But back in the earlier days, I was familiar with real estate, and he still had his trusty Hewlett-Packard financial calculator, and he helped me out both in the calculations on when I was thinking about this one on the Upper West Side that I just couldn't afford at the time. And then when I bought the place up in Washington Heights, he helped me out figuring out the basics of it before I actually went to like a mortgage broker and spoke with them and got the actual, all the terms and everything. So it wasn't such a foreign thing for me. It wasn't like the first time I had done it. And the way that the numbers worked out, it was cheaper for me to buy the property than to rent. Like my monthly payment was going to be less.
Right. And when you're saying buy an apartment, you're talking about like a condo, not an apartment building, correct?
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So that was more like buying a place or buying a condo. And then, so then you got that. So you've got a couple of these single units going. You've got maybe your duplex that you have in New York, and then you move to Miami. And then, so what goes from there? And this is similar to my story as well. A lot of people starting with single family is that we start with things single family, get some cash flow going, and then realize like, somehow the idea of buying apartment buildings actually becomes like, this is possible. So how did that happen? Like, what was the next step? You said you quit your job. So were you making enough off of the duplex and the single? Okay. So how did you, like, what were the other steps in between that you had to do?
So when we got to Miami, I took a look at where I was from a passive income perspective. The duplex that I talked about that we bought that I house hacked in Brooklyn was providing some really nice cash flow. I also had the property in Connecticut, single family home, that was basically just breaking even. But also I had invested in some Broadway shows. My wife, that's her full-time job, and I had the background in theater. And we had invested in a few shows that were doing really well at the time. One of them was Hamilton. So we had some passive income coming in, and she had a job. And I had some savings, right? So I was like, I'm going to take the leap, but it's not like I was making enough money to replace my initial income.
Right.
That took several years to get to that level. While I was doing that and exploring that in Florida, my initial plan was, I'm going to buy properties, single family, maybe duplexes, and I'm going to, flip them or hold on to them or buy and hold and kind of just grow it that way. And it became very clear to me pretty quickly that was not a great way for me to scale my business, because my goal was to have lots of passive income streams coming into me. And flipping properties requires a lot of work, a lot of hands-on active work. not really what I was going for, which is what I had been, following the sort of, Robert Kiyosaki model of
Right.
passive income streams, right? I wanted passive income. I wanted to create multiple streams of income that I didn't have to do anything for. So that's why I started investing passively in the real estate syndications, and also actively pursuing that as well. Because a syndication would take me just as long to find as a single family to flip, because both of those markets are very competitive right now. But a single family would only be enough for me. I have to go and do it and turn it and sell it in 3 to 6 months, maybe 9 months. Where with a multifamily, it's like, okay, I've got this project for a couple of years at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, usually the plans are to hold these for 5 years. And Bronson, I know you're a very successful syndicator yourself, and I know you're not holding your deals for 5 years all the time now. Sometimes you're able to exit them early because the market's been really good, but usually it's not something that you're going to turn around and flip in like 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, no, you brought up some really good points there. Now, you just kind of skimmed by this, but you said that you were a passive investor in Hamilton. So you were able to get on this rocket ship, like the ground floor, and that I'm sure did very well for you, right? Like you talk about taking your shot, and that was your shot, right? That you got in, and so good for you. Congrats on that. I'm sure, it's amazing too, whether it's a building or it's some other type of investment. And to me, like, it doesn't really matter what the investment is what does it do for you, right? Like I love real estate because of what it does for me, right? There's a lot of tax advantages, you get great benefits. And then all of a sudden, once in a while, you have some high flyer that you double your money in a year, or something happens crazy, which it does happen. Or you invest in other things like your Hamilton production, which is great. So you started getting involved passively. You started vetting deals and vetting sponsors, and you did that. And you got to, how many units were you in passively, or how many deals were you in passively before you started becoming more active in the multifamily?
Yeah, I think it was around 1,000 units passive. It was 5 deals.
Okay.
I just never have gone back and counted, but it was probably around 1,100 or 1,200 units.
Okay.
Because one of them was a rather large portfolio of a couple properties. But I was doing that for 2 years, passively investing while looking for my first deal. It took me 2 years to get my first deal as a syndicator.
Yeah.
It takes a long time, I think, to break into markets at times. And I was trying to prove myself in a place that wasn't my backyard. I wasn't doing these in Miami, Florida. And I had a couple of false starts in a couple of markets that I was looking at and building great connections, and just the deals weren't penciling out the way that I needed them to. And I finally found a good market that worked out well. And that was good.
Yeah. What market was that, by the way?
Kansas City.
Kansas City. It's interesting you said that, because that's been my experience as well from the active side. Is it took, I think it took me about 6 months to where I started a meetup, and I basically met my first investor there. He put a small amount in a deal, but it took about another 6 months after that. So it was about a year of really pushing hard and really trying and going different places and networking and trying to find the right deal, the right partners, all of that, before I actually kind of found a partnership that worked, and we started doing deals together. And over the next 18 months, we raised $15 million, which is great. And so, but for you, I mean, you've gotten to, as an active, you're in, how many of those are active? The 8,000 units? Is there like, 5,000 is active or something like that?
A little over 2,400.
2,400. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. About a third of the portfolio is active, and 2/3 is passive. And, I love the passive aspect of it. Quite honestly. I mean, being that I know how to underwrite these deals, I can really vet them well. And that's part of like what the book is it shows people how to, vet these deals. And then, I don't really have to do anything at that point, right?
No, and your book is awesome. I've only read the first, couple chapters, but it really gets in with detail, with stories of just kind of your journey, as well as just how you actually do it. How do you vet these deals? And I love your experience, Matt, because it's both active and passive. And I've always said we should all aspire to be full-time passive investors, because then you have freedom over your time. Now, if you're starting out, or you have money, you have resources, and you want to be more active, or like for me, I didn't have the money, so I leveraged my time and became more active that way and try to create value for other people. Then you basically are active and you go about it, you enjoy it, and there's people that have been doing that for years. But I'd love to know. It's just such an interesting dynamic because you have quite a bit of passive stuff and you got the active stuff. And I'm sure with the passive, like, what's the reason you're still active now? Is it that you really enjoy it, or is it something that, because if you can be more passive, would you want to be more passive, or do you kind of like having some of both because it keeps your skills sharp? And obviously from the book, you really enjoy doing this. So what's the reason you still remain active on a lot of this stuff?
If I had a gazillion dollars, there's a part of me that says, well, then might just take these deals down by myself instead of syndicating them, right? Because I don't have, a lot of times we need like, 6, 10, $20 million of equity, right, to buy these properties. I don't have that kind of capital sitting around. So from that perspective, if maybe I had all that capital, maybe I wouldn't syndicate deals. But the other thing is that I really enjoy helping other people create these passive income streams. That was the reason behind writing the book, was so that people could actually vet deals. Because, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people out there trying to do passive deals nowadays that don't have a lot of experience or kind of underwriting pretty aggressively. And so this is trying to just kind of educate people so that they can know what they're getting into. And I like that. I mean, I've gotten to a point where I have very nice passive cash flow, mainly from real estate, and also some stuff from we've done other Broadway shows that have done well. So that's all going very well for me. And it's like, how do I kind of pay it forward, or, help other people learn to do that? Because what I'm able to do with my time, like if I'll just getting back to the book on 1 second, that the subtitle really tells the whole thing of it's produce passive income, write your own story, and direct your dollars towards positive change. And so what I'm trying to help people do, what I've been able to do, is produce the passive income so you don't have to trade your time for money, maybe as much or maybe not at all, which gives you the freedom to write your own story. What is it that you like? What do you want to do? Where do you want to be spending your time? And I'm hoping that people, I found in the most case, people are usually good people, and they're not just going to sit around and drink margaritas on a beach for the rest of their lives, maybe for some of their lives, but they're going to do something hopefully positive that's going to have an impact on their community. And that's the direct your dollars towards positive change. I mean, I have a friend who he just loves animals. I mean, I like animals, but he's like an animal lover, right? Like animal lover.
Right.
He's a real estate investor, active, and he has a lot of passive income coming in from a lot of different real estate opportunities that he's involved in. And now he donates both money and also time to these animal, sort of, he's not like an activist, he's not like in PETA, but things like they try to help endangered species and things of that nature. And that's what he's passionate about. And that's what he loves. For me, it's about the arts. I'm really into the arts. So I get involved in those types of things.
Yeah, no, it's amazing when you become financially free. Really, the most valuable thing is your time, and you can't make more time. You can make more money, but you can't make more time. So when you have enough money coming in where your expenses are covered, where you have more than enough, then you start saying, well, what can I do with these resources? How can I give back? How can I make the world a better place? And it's something I love what you're doing with your book and with your educational platform. Is you're basically helping to educate people, to teach them about passive investing, teach them about how do you get out of the time for money trade. And I think a lot of professionals, my background was in the medical field, a lot of people that just, they make a ton of money. They make, 500,000 plus, $1 million plus, and yet they live a lifestyle that they just never really can kind of become free because they don't know how to lower their expenses or even what to invest in so that they can actually increase their cash flow. But what happens over time is there's a book it's about Warren Buffett, and it's called The Snowball. And people are like, how did that guy get so wealthy? Well, he started a long time ago and he just kept doing it. And then it became this huge thing where it's, hundreds of billions of dollars. And so now it's like, what's the impact that he wants to leave? And I see what I see you doing with your life as well. Let's shift gears here for a minute. Why don't you talk for a little bit about finding deals. I know these days that's a real challenge, is finding deals. So how are you finding deals these days, both as a passive investor and maybe as an active investor? Maybe you can just talk about some ways that you're finding deals, or maybe that you're finding about deals.
Well, from a passive investment perspective, I meet people like you, Bronson, right? Like we just connected at a real estate conference, and I know that you do deals, and I'm like, hey, can you put me on your list, right? So I like to go to different events, and they can be local, like a local meetup, or sometimes I'll get on a plane and fly somewhere to different real estate conferences and get to meet people. I don't just invest with someone just because I met them for a second at a meetup or at a real estate conference, but I get to develop a relationship with them over time, get to know them, know who they are, and then feel comfortable doing their deals. So that's how I do it from a passive perspective. And when I do invest passively with someone, and I like the way the deal went, I like their communication, I thought they were a good sponsor, well, then I'm going to want to invest with them again and again, right?
Sure.
So that's sort of how that goes. And from an active perspective, on both sides, I would say I can sum it up by saying that it's all about relationships. So relationships with people who are actively have deals from a passive perspective, but from the active perspective, it's all about the relationships that I have made with brokers, with property managers, and with other sponsors at times. I have a deal right now that I'm getting involved in that is being sold by someone that I partner with very often. So he, I think, would prefer to sell it to me than to somebody else, just because he knows me. The last deal that we did, we knew the ownership group. We did not have the highest bid. We were very high, but we weren't the highest. But the sellers know us and have known us for years and knew we weren't going to do some crazy retrade or not be able to come to the closing table, and that the deal would go, and that would go smoothly, and that we are good people to do business with, right? And so a lot of these are certain circumstances like that. One time I got a deal because I had been invested in final, and it got awarded to somebody else. And at the last minute, they had to back in, and the broker called me up, and I kind of swooped in really quickly with a really quick due diligence and a quick close, right? So there's a number of different ways. I have never gotten a deal by just like randomly being the best and high, like the most money on a property. I've never done that. It's just never worked out for me that way. There's always been some weird kind of little circumstance thing here, and there's enough for me to have gotten 2,400 units under my belt that way. It takes a lot of time, a lot of persistence.
Yeah. And you said something too, I think both as an active and as a passive, is that I can't underestimate the value of going to events and meeting people, because you get to in the virtual world, it's great. But then there was an investor that I saw that she forwarded me something saying, oh, I saw this ad and I clicked on it, whatever. It was some like clickbait thing that was like some funnel thing for a deal. And I was like, I've never heard of this guy. And I just I looked, there was nothing there. And I just think, this is a pretty small industry. When you get into the inner workings, everybody kind of knows everybody, not every single person, but you'll know people that know them. I remember when we were, I was in a conference actually at Dallas, this summer, and we were getting ready to buy a deal in Jacksonville. And I'm sitting across the table talking about this deal in Jacksonville. And we go, which one is it? So it was this one. And we're actually buying the deal from his group. I didn't know. It was so funny. And then in a smaller world, one of the investors that had invested in that deal decided to actually invest in the deal again on the other side.
Nice.
So they saw enough value that, hey, they were going to get paid out on this side, and basically that sponsor, and then they decided to jump in with us. And so there's enough, which is so funny. But reputation is huge. And that's why I tell people that are passive, ask around, get to know other passive investors, find out what people's reputation are. There's an online reputation as well, as far as how people are. But when you actually meet other people, that they don't have any bias to tell you one way or the other, they're just passive investors. And you meet those people at conferences. You also meet other great operators and sponsors, and kind of get to know folks that way and see if you have similar values. So I think that's really great. So let me ask you this. This is something we're seeing right now. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of changes, dramatic changes, and you also follow not just real estate, but also the economics and kind of what's happening. We've created, more money than ever's really been created in any time in the past. We're seeing it with inflation. What do you see as far as inflation, interest rates, Do you see multifamily continue to do well? What are areas of opportunity that you see? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
I have no crystal ball, so I really don't know what's going to happen with inflation or interest rates. I mean, I would think that signs point to those going up, right? That's where it seems like it's headed, right? It seems like interest rates are starting to go up, and the Fed has announced that they plan, but they've made announcements in the past and not, and 6 months goes by and then they change their plans. So you have to see how things go, but they're planning to raise interest rates. I think I thought inflation would have been here 5-7 years ago. Quite honestly, I'm surprised it's taken so long because the Fed's been printing so much money, right? So it seems like the chickens are coming home to roost, but we'll have to see how economic policy globally is treated, and we'll figure it out. But this is one of the reasons why I invested in real estate, because I think that over time, real estate has proven to be a really great asset class in terms of holding value, going up when there is inflation. And so I'm investing my own money in real estate opportunities that give me some really great tax advantages, but businesses that are producing nice cash on cash returns, so that, no matter what really happens to the values, the most important thing to me is the cash flow. It's keystone concept number 5 in my book, right? Cash flow is king. If you have that cash flow, it really doesn't matter where you are in a market cycle, because we know real estate's going to go up and it's going to go down, and we don't know how high up or down it goes or when that's going to happen. And trying to time that is something that even the best and the brightest get wrong. I'm not going to try to time it. So I'm going to buy a business that is a good, stable business that's producing cash that we can hold long term. We look to exit our deals in 5 years, but what happens if the market's in a rough place 5 years from now? I want to make sure that it's something that we can hold longer.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think even today they're saying that as far as housing units or apartment units, we're somewhere between 5 and 7 million units short. And that's right now. Oh, yeah. So just the fact that we're there, and I think that my opinion is as interest rates or inflation rises, inflation and rents kind of go tandem. So there's a chance that, I think there's a pretty good chance that rates continue to rise, inflation is high, and rents keep going up. So I think that's something that, that's interesting to look at. Well, can you share maybe one, obviously you've done a lot of, you've had a lot of work, you've done a lot of both on the active side as well as the passive side. Can you share like one tool or resource with our audience that may have helped you in your journey along the way?
The thing that really helped me in my journey was joining a mentorship program. And I don't want to plug one in particular because I think there's a couple of good ones out there, and I don't think it would be fair for me to just hone in on one. I think that if anyone wants to do that, you have to be really careful, because I think there's some bad programs out there as well. So make sure you do your due diligence. But finding a mentor can really help you collapse timeframes and really excel, I think, much faster than you can do it on your own. There's people who do it on their own, but if you want to really collapse timeframes, I think, and move forward quickly, I found that joining a mentorship group was really good for me, because I learned from the mentorship. It was great for networking because I met a bunch of other sponsors and investors, and it just helped me develop solid relationships with them. So that's what I would recommend. I know that's not very specific because I don't want to give preference to one versus another, because there's a couple. There's 3 that I think are really phenomenal that are out there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, I think the value of mentorship can't be understated or overstated either. I mean, it's really very, very important to help you get you there faster. So I want to say this, Matt, you obviously are giving back a lot. You have a really inspiring story, 8,000 units now. You obviously invested in Hamilton. So you rode that one all the way up, and you've been able to really use your resources to make a difference in the world. So I just want to honor you for that. Appreciate you for that. So thanks for coming on the show today. But what's a way that people can get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is on my website. It's Picheny.com. I'll spell it real quick. It's P like in Peter, ICHENY.com. I'll sure you'll put a link to it in the show notes, but you can go there for the book. I have a blog. I write a lot of real estate educational material on there. I have a monthly newsletter. So it's all on Picheny.com.
Picheny.com. Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Matt, hey, appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much. We'll look forward to connecting with you soon. And everybody should go out and check out this book, Backstage Guide to Real Estate. It's a great book. And thanks again, Matt.
Thank you.
All right. So one thing I wanted to talk about from this interview was that Matt talked about his biggest tip was really getting a mentor. Now that could be a paid mentor. That could be somebody that you're actually paying that's saying, hey, we're going to get you from 0 to 1, get you from not having done a deal actively to now you've done a deal. Or it could be somebody who's not a paid mentor, somebody who's just there to help you when you need them. And I have a number of mentors I use for different things. And I have mentors for all different areas of my life. I have mentors when it comes to my business, mentors when it comes to investing. I have mentors when it comes to like my spiritual activities. I have mentors, in family stuff. So you don't just have to have one mentor to do everything. But if you really want to get somewhere, let's say you're saying, I want to get to where I have, substantial passive income, you need to find a mentor who's doing passive income, and you ask them questions. And it doesn't have to be, again, a formal mentorship, but it's just the ability to get in front of people, build a relationship, ask questions, continue to add value to them. And over time, you'll find that you will get there faster. So he talks about collapsing timelines, right? So you can get there faster. So I didn't personally do a paid mentorship. There are some great paid mentorships out there. Some of my friends have paid mentorships. My favorite couple ones that I like, there's one called Think Multifamily with Mark Kenny. They've got a great mentorship program there. And then there's another one that is with Vertical Street Ventures with Kyle Mitchell and Jenny Gu. They're awesome as well. So you can check those out there, but there are many out there. But again, it's good to kind of get references and kind of see what some good mentorships are out there. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And again, thanks for taking the time to educate yourself. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
You've been listening to the Mailbox Money Podcast. For more free resources, articles, and videos, go to bronsonequity.com. There you can download your copy of the special report, The Single Best Investment Strategy During and After a Pandemic. None of the information shared here is an offer to buy a specific investment, and this is for educational purposes only. Consult your financial, legal, and tax professionals and use your own common sense before making any investment decisions. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time for more Mailbox Money.